Packers fans, stay up to date on all of your Packers news this season via our newsletter. You can sign up for the PackersNews.com and more Journal Sentinel newsletters by clicking on the link in the brief field of this video. Hello, Packers fans. Welcome into the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined as always by Tom Silverstein and Ryan Wood here in our Lambeau Field office, where, guys, we are already into week 2. Packers getting ready to head down to the ATL this weekend to face the 1-0 Falcons. Before we kind of get into the details of, recapping this week of practice and the game this Sunday, this game before the season, I kind of just brushed off oh yeah, it's a week 2 game. I feel like this might be a sneaky good game now. I mean, Spoon, what are you kind of thinking about it?
Oh yeah, I don't think it's a slam dunk. I don't think it's a gimme. I think Atlanta, they weren't dominant in beating Carolina, but they're kind of a team, finding itself with with a second-year quarterback and a really good running game. So this is going to be like a really good test of whether the Packers are any good against the run. Was it a mirage Sunday, or is it, are they a different defense this year?
Ryan, what are you most looking forward to seeing in this game on Sunday?
I think it's whether or not Jordan Love can stack 2 good games back together. I mean, that's ultimately the job of a starting quarterback in this league, is can you stack it week to week? And as the game film grows, and it's still pretty small, but as the catalog of his tape grows, he's going to see more looks designed to exploit his weaknesses, and he's going to have to overcome that. So can he? This is a winnable game. This is a game that he can go out there and play well, and so I'm very curious if he will.
You mentioned looks, so I'm going to kind of jump ahead to a subject that I was going to just bring up later, but let's go ahead and talk about it now. It felt like, at least to me, so I want y'all's opinion, the Packers threw so many looks on tape Sunday versus the Bears to give opponents just so many different things to prepare for. I mean, that one 3 tight end set where they had 2 in the backfield and then A.J. Dillon behind Love. I asked Dillon yesterday, we always joke about 3 tight end sets, but have you ever lined up in a formation like that? And he said, that has to be the first time I've ever done that in football, much less the NFL. So is that a good week 1 strategy? Some teams like to go super vanilla until they get farther into the season, and some teams like to throw everything on tape. Spoon, do you think that's a good strategy for Matt LaFleur and company?
Well, if you're playing a division rival, when it counts in the division, absolutely. You throw whatever you got at them. You got to win that first game, and you got to beat. You had no idea what the Bears were going to be. I had no idea what they were going to be, and I don't know if the Packers did either. So, yeah, you have to show what you're going to be. But a lot of it is we're going to find out. What looks different is that Aaron Rodgers isn't the quarterback, and they're going to do things with Jordan Love that they didn't do with Aaron Rodgers. So it's going to look like they're throwing out all kinds of really creative stuff, when really what they're doing is playing to Jordan Love's strengths, and that's different than Aaron Rodgers. Jordan Love doesn't mind all the motion. Rodgers hated motion, and Love doesn't hate it. What did LaFleur say? Love didn't change a single play during the game. And, they set up, he's a guy who can throw it down the middle. He can throw it across the middle. I never thought that was Rodgers' big strength. He was always kind of a perimeter guy. Slants and things weren't his deal. But, I thought it was a good job of making use of what Love is. Now, everybody's seen it, and, each week it'll probably get more difficult for Love.
Ryan, anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I was just going to say, and Spoon said it himself, that I think what really helps facilitate that is the fact that it's not a lot going on at the line of scrimmage before snaps. There's more time. There's more, and when there's more time, you can get more creative. You have the flexibility of saying, okay, here's the play, go run it, and it can be more creative. So I think that was a benefit that they saw week one.
And the no audible thing, I wonder if that changes as we get further into the season and Love just becomes more comfortable doing it as well.
Well, consider how many rookies played. I mean, how many skill player rookies played. Wicks, Malik Heath, Musgrave, Kraft, Ben Sims. Who else am I forgetting? Anybody else?
Did you say Reed?
Oh,
Like
Jaden
12.
Reed.
Yeah.
There's like 12 on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. So, I mean, why confuse them with all kinds of stuff at the line of scrimmage? So it was probably a good idea. But yeah, I agree. I think as the season goes on, he'll get more latitude to do things.
Let's look ahead to this game in Atlanta. I mean, let's start with the biggest storyline that came out of Atlanta this past weekend. Jesse Bates finished their game with 10 tackles, 2 interceptions, and a forced fumble. First player since the year 2000 to do that. I mean, this team, I saw somebody say on Twitter this morning, and it cracked me up. This Atlanta team is just a haphazard group of veterans nobody wanted anymore and rookies. And, but then you've got somebody like Jesse Bates in his 6th year who kind of comes out and has a game like that against a rookie quarterback in his first NFL start. So something to consider. Jordan Love, this is his first year, but he has at least been in the league for a couple of years. How much does that account for what he might be able to do better than Bryce Young against this defense and or worse? And I'm going to set you up with one thing in particular here. Jordan Love yesterday, when talking about Jesse Bates and this this Falcons defense, which secondary has Jerry Gray there now, he mentioned multiple times like he's so good at reading a quarterback's eyes, and so I have to be very careful of that. And so, what can Jordan Love take from what he did versus the Bears and use against this Falcons defense maybe better than Bryce Young was able to do, Ryan?
Well, I think one of the fascinating parts of this game is that the Falcons defense had a field day against a true rookie quarterback in Bryce Young last year. And Bryce Young's making his first career start. Jordan Love's going to make his 3rd career start against the same defense the very next week. But you're going to see what difference there is between a true rookie quarterback and a quarterback that's not a true rookie, a quarterback that's actually been in this league for 3 years, has had time to develop, to learn. And one of the things that we've seen Jordan Love be very intentional about is his eye manipulation. He has done a good job of looking coverages open and looking his receivers open, using his body language where he's looking on the field to open those throwing windows. And that's something that you don't always expect a true rookie, to come in and be able to do. So I think, I don't know how much the difference really is. I think we're going to see 1 week to the next with the Falcons defense as a barometer, how much those 3 years really help.
Spoon, one of the biggest things that could help Jordan Love and any young quarterback, but especially Jordan Love, is if he had Aaron Jones on the field. Aaron Jones pulled his hamstring versus Chicago. I think he had his helmet at Thursday's practice, but stayed inside.
Yeah, he had his pads on too.
Okay.
So they were just working him with the training staff. I don't know if they were preparing him to try to take a few snaps in practice, but I would never rule out Aaron Jones. Mm-hmm. He's the kind of guy who heals pretty fast, and if there's any way he can play, he's going to play. But maybe they can get away with playing him for 10 snaps, or 15 snaps, or maybe more than that. But they'll be careful. There's no way you want to put that guy in danger because he's their whole offense right now, at least until Christian Watson gets back. He
only had 11 touches versus Chicago, and he was directly involved in 3 touchdown drives. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, look at how much he can do with even those critical. 3 touches. Although that, I still am interested to see if he doesn't play, if they use Emmanuel Wilson. Mm. We saw the guy can run, I don't know what he's going to be able to do on 3rd down or anything like that, but maybe those are going to be Dylan's downs. But it would be interesting to see if they have the confidence in him that they did in Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, and Malik Heath. I'm glad you brought up Wilson because this goes into my next point directly. Do they need a perimeter threat in the run game, especially versus this Falcons defense where, we saw A.J. Dillon average 1.2 yards per carry versus Chicago. And that competition is only going to get a little bit steeper this week because you have Calais Campbell there in the middle of that Falcons line. Do you need a perimeter run threat? And if it's not going to be Aaron Jones, should it be Emmanuel Wilson, Ryan?
Yeah, and I certainly that if Aaron Jones doesn't play, you're going to see Emmanuel Wilson. I think that the shame for the Packers side is that the two players in their offense that can benefit the most from being on turf are the two guys that the turf might be a real issue for because of lower body injuries, both Aaron Jones and Christian Watson with the hamstring. You get those guys fully healthy on turf, it's a track meet. I know David Bakhtiari hates the turf. Aaron Jones and Christian Watson like the turf. They like being able to grip and just let it go. But I wonder how much the turf plays a consideration in whether or not those guys will go, how much they go if they do go. Because lower body injuries, it doesn't mesh well with turf field.
Speaking of Aaron Jones on the turf, so yes, Aaron Jones and Christian, when I did a big turf story last year, Christian Watson told me, he was like, I kind of like it. I can go so much faster. Last night, yes, I think it was SportsCenter posted something on their socials about Roger Goodell said, there are some players who actually prefer turf over grass. And David Bakhtiari and Raheem Mostert, a couple other players, commented on it. And they're like, who are these guys? Name names. And they acted all surprised when 3 hours earlier, David Bakhtiari had given you names of people who actually prefer turf.
Yeah, well, he had a great breakdown, too. He said that, the lighter players that wear lighter cleats that don't stick in the ground on a turf field as much, they love turf because it's a track meet. Mm-hmm. But offensive linemen, defensive linemen, edge rushers, he actually said edge rushers prefer the turf because it helps them turn more, their angulation, that they're able to kind of get more torque and turn that corner better. And obviously quarterbacks, not a fan of the turf field because they wear molded cleats. They're heavier cleats. They stick in the ground more to give more traction.
Yeah. Well, they will be playing on turf this weekend, for better or for worse. So we'll see if that factors into the decision of who's playing as well. Let's move to the outside perimeter, share a little bit more. If Christian Watson does not play again, was he at practice today on Thursday, guys?
He was working inside.
Yeah,
inside?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just play devil's advocate here and take both sides of it. Let's say he doesn't play. Did you see enough out of Romeo Doubs and these young rookies versus the Bears to think, they could get by one more week without Christian Watson?
Saw enough out of Romeo Doubs.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody in the building has any concern about him. But no. Jaden Reed had a pretty decent game. Jaden Reed is going to be a factor this season. The other guys, they weren't really called upon to do that much. Heath was mostly a blocker, and Wicks, they must like his blocking too because they played him quite a bit. Didn't throw it to him all that much. I would guess that eventually it's going to start to hurt them. They're not going to be able to get away with it forever.
I think it's a lot easier this week to get by without Christian Watson there than Aaron Jones. That's going to be tough if they don't have Aaron Jones or if he's heavily, significantly diminished because of his snap count. Christian Watson, if he plays this week, next week even, his full impact on the offense is only going to go as far as Jordan Love's deep ball can allow it. I mean, that's got to develop for the Packers to really realize Christian Watson's full potential. I still think there's things that they can do on jet sweeps, just getting him the ball, scheming him up in open field that you can take advantage of that speed. But until he's Christian Watson, what he was late last season, he's got to have a quarterback that can throw him the deep ball.
Should there be any concern with the fact that he said this is the same hamstring as last year? I mean, should there be any concern there, just long term, or is this just kind of part of football and it happens, especially with a speedy guy?
Didn't he say it was a different spot?
It was a different spot, same leg, but I think that there's a reason Christian Watson was a second-round pick. With his RAS, if there wasn't medical concern going into the draft, that's a first-round pick. Yeah. So that was the only reason, really.
That and drops.
Drops as well.
Reason. But he is a tightly wound dude. I mean, you've seen him.
Yeah.
Remember, you were here for the beginning of Clay Matthews' career. Every training camp he pulled a hamstring, and he missed training camp for the first 3 years. And they finally put him on a program where, I mean, he worked all year on his hamstrings, and then it didn't really bother him. And maybe they're going to have to do that with Watson.
I think you might see that because what did we see all camp? Christian Watson was healthy. He practiced all throughout camp.
Yeah,
they
that's
didn't.
true.
They didn't taper him. He
No.
was on the field every day, taking all the reps. I get it. He's a second-year receiver, but as he matures in this league, that's going to be less important for him to get those developmental reps.
Yeah.
I imagine you're going to see that tailed back a little bit.
I think I mentioned this last year on the podcast, but something Sammy Watkins told me at the beginning of last year when Watson pulled his hamstring the first time was fast guys have to learn how to use their speed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that maybe you just see Christian Watson figure out as he gets farther and farther into this league. Okay, flip side of that. Let's say he does play. What sort of a difference does it make versus this Falcons defense?
I just don't think he's going to play. I am really convinced he's not going to play. I mean, he's not out there today. He hasn't practiced for, almost 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
I thought the only chance was if he was on the field practicing today, but
Yeah.
it sure looks like he's going to have a week of rehab. They're going to take the long view with him, and next week perhaps you see him return to practice and try to get him ready for the home
Grass.
opener.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And because, feasibly, again, any given Sunday, anything can happen. But you really want him back by that Thursday night game versus the Lions. Fair?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
That's key.
That's
Yep.
when you want him back.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
if he misses Falcons, if he misses who they play, Saints.
Well, that's a
next
great
week.
point. Even if he returns against the Saints, he might
It's a
not
short
play all
week.
that much.
Right.
It might not be full allotment of snaps, kind of a pitch count that Rashawn Gary's been on.
Great transition. Literally what
Here
I was
for
going to
ya.
say next. Rashawn Gary was on a pitch count versus Chicago. We saw what he was able to do. Do you take that pitch count off of him this week?
Probably expand it. You probably don't want to go crazy with it. I was wrong. I mean, I thought they were going to play
No.
quite a bit.
Spoon, don't that shakes the foundation of everything I believe
Yeah,
if you're
right.
wrong.
I'm a wrong once in a while.
Once a season.
But I actually understood why they did it, and it paid off. I mean, they said he had 7 pressures and 9 snaps. I'm just still in the third quarter watching it, but he did have a lot of pressures. And but that's good in 9 snaps. So if that had been 45 snaps, maybe he'd still only have 7 pressures. So I think it's not a bad thing, especially given Lucas Van Ness
Where did that come from?
popped out of nowhere.
Yeah.
We didn't see that in camp at all, and all of a sudden, boom! It's not just the sack. The sack was really a nice play. Played that perfectly, but running stunts, and he sacrificed himself for some guys on stunts, and I thought he played pretty well. And if they can add him, keep grooming him, why rush Gary? You're going to need Gary down the road. So there's no sense in rushing him.
Well, that's why they were able to hold him to 12 snaps, and it's why he's probably not going to go all that much increase this week, is because not just they have Kenny Clark, but they've got, and not just Preston Smith, they got Lucas Van Ness, they've got Colby Wooden, they've got Carl Brooks, they've got Justin Hollins.
Kingsley.
They have Kingsley and Igbare. They have so much depth. For them to have 4 sacks, 4 different players have sacks on Justin Fields and not one of them be Rashawn Gary, speaks to the depth that they have. And Rashawn Gary's not going to be Rashawn Gary again until he's back on the field having 60 snaps. But there's no need to expedite that process because you've got all this wealth of talent and depth around him. And I think what's going to be interesting is once he is Rashawn Gary again, taking 60 snaps a game, being surrounded by talent, Kenny Clark can tell you when there's talent on that defensive line around him, it's a lot easier for him. Now that there's talent in that defensive front more than what we've seen, will it be easier for Rashawn Gary? Is there going to be fewer chips? Is it going to be more schemed up pass rush opportunities that you got to account for someone else? Not that Rashawn Gary's not going to be any offensive line's top priority. He will be. But still, a little bit easier goes a long way.
In the short time that I have been here, y'all have been covering Kenny Clark longer than I have, but in the short time I've been here, I've never seen Kenny Clark as animated talking about a game as he was Sunday when he was talking about Devontae Wyatt, TJ Slayton, and then what they also got from Wooden and Brooks and playing alongside those guys. He was that's just the most effusive and animated I've ever seen him.
Well, he's sucked it up for how many years with, okay talent around him.
Dean Lowry.
But yeah, Dean Lowry, Jerron Reed, guys like, God, my memory's so bad. But, he's always had to take the nose and be doubled. That's just the life of a nose tackle. And hey, TJ Slayton, it's all yours now. Slayton had to bang it out in the middle. He probably wasn't that happy with it, but it gives Kenny Clark some more opportunities. And, I think he got some good matchups. And so I thought the most important thing was how many stunts and twists and, how maybe it wasn't how many they did, but how effective they were. They did show some speed.
Now, here's the question. How much of that is that the Bears have a terrible offensive line?
Right.
Exactly.
And how much of that is they're this good?
Right.
And we said it after the game. I didn't feel like I learned all that much about the Packers' ceiling in the opener because the Bears are terrible.
Yeah.
And we knew that the Bears were terrible. And if you've been paying attention, you knew that the Packers wouldn't be terrible. They're not a terrible team. There's a lot of talent there. They're just young. So, yeah, they passed that very low bar on both sides of the ball. But how high can that go? I still don't think we know.
I don't either.
Well, for as tough as of a challenge as Justin Fields is, the challenge gets only tougher this week against Bijan Robinson and I'm totally blanking.
Tyler Algier.
Thank you, Algier.
And they may get Cordero Patterson back.
Oh,
this
okay.
week, who is a bruising, guy whose average is six
Right.
yards a carry for his career. So he's a different type of back. So they got 3 different backs that can do some damage.
So what different sort of challenge? I know, Spoon, you talked about Bijan Robinson in your story yesterday. He's only a rookie, but just already what has he kind of shown in a short amount of time?
All you got to do is look at the touchdown catch he had in the flat against the Panthers, where he just kind of stepped aside and the guy went flying right by him. I mean, he's 5'11" and almost 220 pounds.
That's
and
a bull.
And he runs like the wind, and he's got amazing feet, and he can catch. I think he's going to present a huge problem, but, the Algier is a 1,000-yard rusher as a rookie. So they got 2 guys where they can play them together. Robinson can be a receiver. I think they're going to present a pretty big problem for the Packers. They got a much better offensive line. It's not great, but it's a lot better than what the Bears have.
Low bar.
Yeah, very low bar. So to me, this is like a real big test. It's a different game. They don't have to worry about Ritter running all over the place, Desmond Ritter, their quarterback. So they can focus on the run, but I think it's going to be, they run that wide zone, and if those guys aren't getting off cut blocks and stuff like that, it could be a long day.
When you were describing with how those 2 running backs complement each other, it made me think that's what everybody thought Jones and Dillon would be once they got going.
Yeah. Except both of these guys are speed backs. They're like home run. I mean, Algier isn't like a 4-4 guy, but, when he gets going, he can break off some big runs. And Robinson, that's all he did in college.
That's why it's just so important that Quay Walker plays this Sunday.
Yeah.
And he's still in concussion protocol, but he did practice today, which is a really positive sign. And if it goes well, they'll check his base levels Friday. But if everything goes well, he's trending toward being able to play. But not only is he important because he's the athletic specimen in the middle of the field against Bijan Robinson or even Kyle Pitts, those guys, the matchups that he can help with. But the amount of base defense that they might need to play against this run game, Desmond Ritter does not throw the ball down the field, so you can play a lot of base. Having both him and Devondre Campbell available, you can only do that if Quay Walker clears concussion protocol. So if he's available Sunday, I look at, on the offensive side, Aaron Jones being available is critical, but I think it's just as critical that Quay Walker is available for this defense.
Let me ask you both a question. Quay Walker, who did have his helmet on Thursday's practice, correct? But it's just a matter. We'll find out for sure.
He
later.
he was taking part in the individual drills.
Okay.
So that's a pretty good sign.
Yeah.
I imagine he's not going to take a hit today, but You think?
Oh, yeah, I mean, if he's cleared to what the last stage of it is, you practice and see how you react to practice.
Okay.
And tomorrow if he feels fine, and then he goes to the independent neurologist, then they clear him. So yeah, he's going to take part in some stuff today, I think.
So let me ask you both this though. Quay Walker is not your prototypical old school neck roll downhill linebacker. He's much more of a speedy guy. But is that not what you kind of need when you've got the NFL offenses shifting to running backs that are no longer 2 yards in a cloud of dust, but guys like Bijan Robinson?
Well, he's good for a wide zone because he can cover sideline to sideline. So as they're moving to the perimeter, he can move with them and avoid blocks, but he's also in danger of overrunning stuff and leaving huge cutback lanes because he's such an aggressive player. So that's something I'm sure they got to work on with him is, all right, it's great, get to the sideline, but don't lose your gap because the whole thing is dependent on cutback lanes. So he is good for that as long as he plays it right.
The athleticism is why he was drafted in the first round. I mean, the Packers hadn't drafted an inside linebacker in the first round since A.J. Hawk in 2005. They weren't just going to draft an inside linebacker in the first round. He had to be an athletic fit for their prototype, to your point, as the NFL does transition more to, running backs have, not in terms of market value, but in terms of on the field. You've seen a lot of running backs in terms of versatility, be able to do a whole bunch to give defenses matchup problems. Same thing for tight ends. And the Falcons got two really good ones in Robinson and Pitts. So, yes, this is exactly the type of matchup that is the reason why Quay Walker was drafted in the first round.
Yeah, and some of that play action stuff, they with Pitts, I mean, you gotta worry about him, and then Drake London. I mean, he didn't do anything in the Panthers game. Hardly threw him. I'm not sure why, but that's two guys off of play action you better be really cognizant of. So you can't necessarily load the box every single down because, Pitts can get downfield in a hurry, and London's a big guy who can make some plays downfield.
Speaking of Pitts, I wanted to talk about him and Drake London, but Pitts specifically. Do you think at times, and I'm curious, Spoon, I know you watch every single play, so I'm curious if you think there's more to it than what I'm making of it. Do you think Arthur Smith just forgets he's on their team?
Pitts?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, you also have to have a quarterback who can get him the ball and recognize when he's open. He's probably gotten doubled his entire life, since he's been in Atlanta. Getting Drake London, I'm sure, was supposed to help. But yeah, I'd be thrown to that guy 10 times a game if I were them.
Yeah. I mean, I covered him in college, and it was almost like Devontae when he was here. He was easily getting 14, 15 receptions a game. And he, carried that offense in 2020. And so he can definitely do it. Of course, it's different in the NFL. But, Ryan, let's say Arthur Smith does decide all of a sudden to flip his game plan on its head and throw to Kyle Pitts a bunch on Sunday. How do you negate an athlete like that?
Well, you got to fit your assignments. This is a really big week for Darnell Savage, and Darnell Savage had a really good week one. It was fascinating
10 tackles.
When I talked to him after the game. I said, hey, that must feel pretty good, a lot of pressure on you coming, after last season. You're the leader at the safeties. You must be pretty satisfied with that. He's like, nah, not really. And it wasn't until he actually checked the box score that he felt like he actually did anything in the game. He still wants to get turnover plays. And the reason that's fascinating is because Darnell Savage just showed that less is more. He'd had 10 tackles once in the past 2 seasons, and that was the last year's finale against the Lions. This is not what Darnell Savage did in the opener is not Darnell Savage's game. It was the safety that the Packers need and not the safety that he wants to be. So that internal tug of war is still very much going on inside him. He showed that, he can be impactful and have a great influence on the game by just doing what the Packers tell him to do. Just do your job. Don't go chasing plays. Don't wander, because you can't do that as a safety. There can't be any of that, because if they start wandering this week, Kyle Pitts will kill you. You can't let him be wide open like last year's opener with Justin Jefferson, where he just ran roughshod all over the Packers secondary. You can't make it easy for great players. You have to make them earn everything they get, and they're probably still going to get some, but you can't make it easy.
He needs to realize he could get a decent second contract if he does what he did Sunday, which was 2 tackles for loss. He blitzed. He made all his tackles. I don't think he missed any tackles. That's a completely different player than what we saw last year. If I'm his agent, I'm saying, hey, stop all that talk about I didn't do anything. You just do what you did and keep that up.
It was just so fascinating to me because I think we would have all expected Darnell Savage to feel pretty damn good about things. Like, that was the best game he's played in a long time. Yeah. And it wasn't that reaction. Nah, I could have done more. It's part
of the problem.
I literally said, I go, a year ago, weren't you telling me that you need to just do your job and fit your assignment and stop chasing plays? Isn't that exactly the type of game you're talking about? And he's like, yeah. He's like, oh, that's true. Like, it was. But I was stunned. It was not the reaction that I expected.
After the game, in the locker room, I went up to talk to Darnell Savage, and he was next to Rasul Douglas in the locker room in Chicago. And I made the comment, like, that you two led in tackles today. And they were like, oh, really? And, like, they had no idea. And they, like, did their little handshake. And then they're like, that's pretty cool. And then I'm thinking, oh, crap, I hope I, like, was right. Because I had not looked at a box score yet. I was going purely off of just, what it had been when I left the press box with 4 minutes left in the game. But, yeah, impressive games from both of them. Something they'll have to do again this weekend. We also saw the NFL debut of Daniel Whelan, Anders Carlson with a 57-yard field goal. He actually should have an easier job this week if called upon to do that because he's going to be in a dome. So I guess my question is, any concerns with the two of those guys after seeing what they did on Sunday and then heading into this week as well?
I don't think there were concerns. I mean, Whelan, wasn't it 52?
52.
52 yards.
52 yards?
Yeah.
I was trying to spot him 5.
It would have been good from 57.
Yeah, it would have been easily. And it was a high snap that Whelan did a good job of getting down, and Carlson didn't get screwed up by it.
All things that they were worried about.
Yeah, and they got 2 good returns from Jaden Reed. He reminds me a little bit. I mean, this is way exaggeration, and don't take it hyperbole.
Oh boy!
But the way he catches the ball reminds me of Desmond Howard. He catches really soft hands. He looks, he's got it, and then he assesses like boom, and because he takes us like a half second to assess what's going on. He doesn't get going right away, but once he does, then he's off and running.
So Jaden Reed, Super Bowl MVP. Marketed stone, says Tom Silverstein.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned the hesitation because that's the pause. Let's call it the pause instead. Because I was thinking of it as hesitation. Like, why is he stopping? Why is he not planning and going? But you're saying it's because he's so fast, he can afford to do that and assess?
I think so. I'd like to talk to him about it. I'd like to ask him about it because there's some guys who just take off. But it seems to me that maybe he knows when the coverage isn't in his face and he's got a second to read the lanes. But he did it twice. And one time, I think he ended up with 11-yard return, and the other time he broke it down the sideline.
Right. And, I guess to your point, what do they always say about, like, Howard's touchdown return in the Super Bowl, that it only happened because he followed the block? Mm-hmm. And so,
Well, that and there was like a 50-foot wide lane for him
really?
to run through. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the best block kickoffs I've ever seen. And he just had to make one good kick or one good cut and then beat the kicker. So... but he had some other really good returns, too.
I wonder if Jaden Reed has watched any Desmond Howard highlights.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
What's strange to me is it looked a lot like that hesitation, looked a lot like Amari Rodgers. And Amari Rodgers ran a 4.49. Jaden Reed ran a 4.45. And both those, but there's some short area quickness there that Amari Rodgers did not have. And they might have ran similar 40 times, but not in the first 10.
But the other thing is, and this is what I was trying to say about Desmond Howard. So Desmond Howard had the most natural fielding ability.
Like
so
cradle?
it just no, it's more like it just dropped into his hands, and then he was so good at catching it that he could get his attention on who was coming, because the catch was going to be for sure, And I think that's what Jaden Reed does. He looks really confident when he's catching it, soft hands, and then, he knows he's got it. Where probably the other, a lot of other guys like Amari Rodgers, they look it in and then they go. So he may get a little bit of an advantage by having really good hands.
Did Amari Rodgers do much punt return?
He did, in college,
Because Jaden
and
Reed's,
he was good, I think. He was pretty good.
Jaden Reed's always done that. His first Pop Warner football game, his first punt return, he returned for a touchdown, and it's just he had a 93-yard punt return touch. I don't know. I think it was a touchdown. In a second game at Central Michigan, he had a couple. At Michigan State, he's just always been able to do that. So that confidence comes from a literal lifetime of doing it and succeeding, and it's always been natural to him.
Yeah. Between that and Nixon, they might have a decent little return game here. Keyshawn Nixon actually let one go out of the end zone, or took let one go out and didn't try to bring it back. I feel like Rich Bisaccia was probably proud of that.
Yeah.
And then he took another one 3 yards deep in, but still, I think he returned it, 37 yards or something, out to the 34. I feel like 72% positive that's what happened.
Okay.
To your point on the kicking game, I saw a tweet from Lawrence Tynes, former Giants kicker. If you're a Packers fan, I'm sure you remember that name. Saying
they do remember.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Saying that for all this talk about the turf, if you go to natural grass, you're losing like 5 percentage points around the league on field goals. It's that critical for kickers, because it's just better traction. You don't have bad fields. It has improved the kicking game immensely. So I would imagine that, Carlson's going to enjoy kicking on the turf, and it's a weather-controlled climate indoors. You can probably see some bombs for Wheeling because he's got a big leg, and there's not going to be any wind. So both those guys are probably going to enjoy Atlanta.
I wonder if they'll open the roof. Something they can do there. For all this discussion about turf or grass, it's of course been a major discussion this week because Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles on Monday night, lost for the season, and immediately you saw players around the league say one factor you can help there is the turf versus the grass. I know that's going to continue to be a long debate, so we'll put aside the turf and grass of it all. Let's focus on Aaron Rodgers. It's some logistical, some housekeeping for the Packers that comes with that. That will stay a second-round pick from the trade as opposed to being a first. He would have needed to play 65% of the snaps. It's obviously not going to happen. There's still a question of if he'll retire or return next year and want to get through this grueling rehab that is ahead of him and to be able to play again. Ryan, I'm going to start with you. You talked to a lot of guys in the locker room yesterday just about what it was to see someone that so many of them did play with for so long, go down in such a way. I think it was 4 snaps into the game. What was kind of the general consensus from the locker room?
Oh, everyone was disappointed. And this, at the end of the day, it's not just even a teammate thing. NFL player fraternity is very close. No one likes to see that. And everyone that goes out on the field knows that they could be next. I mean, it's what they sign up for. It's the risk that they are aware of every time they step on the field. So it's always terrible to see that. I'll tell you, my impressions just on the three dropbacks that he had before tearing his Achilles, you wonder what in the world the Jets were thinking. A terrible offensive line. Now, I think, and we're talking strictly football here, none of us, nobody wants to see injuries. It's bad for the game. It's terrible for the player. From a football sense, I think Aaron Rodgers shoulders some responsibility too. It reminded me, I'll never forget the 2014 playoff run when he had that torn left calf and he had no mobility. It was some of the best I've ever seen Aaron Rodgers play. He could not leave the pocket, so he just had to stand there and throw. Aaron Rodgers always had that kind of mind, where he diagnoses the field so quickly, even before the snap. as he advanced in age, I always kind of just wondered, Spoon, if he'd stand and throw more, just be a deliverer, kind of Tom Brady. That's what prolonged Tom Brady's career so much. The Jets have a terrible offensive line, and he looked defenseless behind it. But he also, I think on the play that he tore his Achilles, he had a receiver wide open in the flat. Like the play clock never developed or changed inside his head. He always wanted to extend. He always wanted the big play. You wonder if he just gets rid of the ball, if he get a lot fewer hits, and those accumulate over the years. So from a football standpoint, getting to those 65% of the snaps this season might have been a problem anyway. Now, it's just devastating that it happened in 4 snaps. Nobody wants to see that.
Yeah.
It's you're exactly right. First of all, I am against turf too, and I think they should eliminate it.
They're changing it to grass anyways for the World Cup. Like,
Yeah. Keep it there.
It's just stupid. But okay, that aside, someone told me go back and look at the plays, and everybody's making a big deal about the Jets cutting the defensive ends on the side, but that's because those plays were slants, and the one he got hurt on, Garrett Wilson, is cutting right into the middle of the field, wide open, and he didn't throw it. Why didn't he throw it? He had a slant on the other one that he got hit on too. He's fishing for the big play. He's never been a guy who, likes to just hit a quick slant and let the guy, run for whatever. He's always fishing for something big, and he just can't move like he used to. He didn't look like it anyway there.
He didn't look like it last year.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's not new. It was last year like that.
Yeah, and so I think he was his own worst enemy. I wanted to see him play. I wanted to see how their season went, just out of curiosity. But just get rid of the ball. That's how many times have we said that, or heard that?
And that's why
take Lazard on the slant. Don't look for Devontae.
What Jordan Love is doing, yes, the deep ball needs to come. You need big plays too. But with Jordan, look, the longest pass play Sunday, 51 yards. It was a screen pass. The 4th and 3, 35-yard touchdown. Yeah. That looks like a big play in the box sheet. He threw the ball about 5 yards. There's nothing wrong with that. Get the ball to your playmakers, even if it's close to the line of scrimmage, and let your most athletic, your most talented playmakers do something with the ball. That's a big part of this game too, from the quarterback position. I don't know why it never, as you're an aging quarterback and your mobility declines, as it does for everyone. I don't know why the internal clock didn't evolve as well. I never understood that.
And that's something that I thought would just almost, and maybe this was naive, but I almost just thought that would be a given. Because when he went there and everybody started talking about it being a Super Bowl caliber team, I was like, well, that offensive line is not a Super Bowl caliber line. It doesn't matter what weapons you got if the guy throwing to him can't be kept upright. So to your point, you would think, like you look at what Tom Brady did. He gets the ball out quicker, doesn't take the hits. All of that being said, I want to go back to what you were talking about with the cut blocking, because that was something that reports came out on Tuesday that it was a complaint Aaron Rodgers had to the coaches. David Bakhtiari tweeted something about, I never cut block unless Aaron told me in the huddle to do so. Can you just explain to people listening who maybe don't understand the minutia of it as much, what that means in the middle of a play, why that's such a big deal, possibly?
Well, so Garrett Wilson is coming, let's say left to right, and the left tackle has to get that end down. He has to either kick him way out or get him down on the ground so that he has a passing lane right to Garrett Wilson. Otherwise, the guy might be able to bat it down. I think Rodgers has always sort of avoided throwing down the middle because he's not the tallest guy. He's 6'2". Like Brady became a statue, but he's 6'5". He can see everything down the field. And Rodgers he's 6'2", and he's always moved around the pocket to find throwing lanes. And this, what the irony is, it's Nathaniel Hackett. And he set up this play, and you don't like it? You don't like cut blocks? It just blows my mind. I mean, why would he call it if it wasn't
Here's my question.
plan.
Here's my question. What I wonder, is that an offensive line coach that dictates the kind of block up front? I wonder if, because other than that, it makes no sense. Nathaniel Hackett is Aaron Rodgers' guy.
Yeah.
And it's not like they don't go over every play that's going to be in the game with Rodgers anyway. It's how they did it with the Packers.
Yeah,
Nathaniel Hackett said that that's what they do. So I have to wonder if, okay, left tackle, you cut on if that comes from the offensive line coach, because they have some autonomy over what happens at their position. I don't know how the division of breakdown goes when it comes to assignments positionally,
Yeah, I don't
especially
either.
with the Jets, but I have to wonder.
You would think the coordinator is
Yeah.
the boss of the offensive line coach. And you've invested all this money in Rodgers. Okay. I mean, he's got to sign off on it. Anyway, I don't know. I mean, we're not inside, and I don't know, but those are all questions that I would love to hear him address.
At the end of the day, it was a bad offensive line protecting an old quarterback who extends the ball, extends the play, that holds on to the ball.
Recipe for disaster.
Exactly. And so I don't know if the 65% of snaps would have happened even if the absolute devastation of an torn Achilles on the fourth snap never occurred. But it sure didn't look like they were set up for they were set up for problems there.
I talked to someone who was with the Buccaneers when they got Brady, and he said the first thing they did was make sure they had an offensive line. And then, I mean, they didn't purposely draft Tristan Wirfs that year. I mean, they didn't go after him, but he fell to them, and they were like, boom, we'll take him,
They went and got
And then they had this great
Jansen.
offensive line.
Yep.
And,
The Jets get Dalvin Cook.
yeah. And,
You know?
and
Well, would they already have Brees Hall?
the irony of it is that he would have been so much better off here. I mean, they didn't want him. Okay, so that's off the table. But he was even last year probably better off behind that offensive line than he would have been behind the Jets' offensive line this year.
That's another, I think, worthwhile point to make is Brian Gutekunst decided it was time to make the trade for two reasons. One, he was paying a ton of money to an old quarterback, and the old quarterbacks break down in this league. Two, he had a young quarterback who was a first-round pick that needed snaps. And I think at the end of the day, more than anything, this is an example of youth usually wins out. I know, Spoon, you had an excellent column on this, but youth usually wins out in this league. It is a young man's league. And imagine if this had been without the trade. And we don't know that Aaron Rodgers would tear his Achilles if he never got traded, but we do know that he was a 39-year-old quarterback, turns 40 in December. Mm-hmm. We know that he played through a lot of injuries last year, and we know that that's what happens with aging quarterbacks. It sure seems like a prescient decision at this point, and maybe a year too late because, Aaron Rodgers would have netted much more in return for a trade after the 2021 season than 2022, but it was a decision made out of, okay, young over old, and that's usually the way to go in this league.
Before I wrap us up, just the last thing. Did y'all see about the bar in Milwaukee?
Yeah, oh my goodness.
I didn't see what they ended up doing. Because, the Jets won, so it didn't matter.
And
right?
the funniest part was CBS 58 was there live and just in the 10 o'clock news as that game ended, and you see the faces of everyone in the background realize, I have made a bad decision. I have made very... And it wasn't one drink. It was the full tab.
Yes, yeah.
And then there was the Jets fan that looked like he was completely hammered, but did not care at all because he's shocked. I will say,
he's going to pay that $200 tab with glee.
On a serious note, I was disappointed. Unfortunately, not shocked how many people were cheering the initial injury. I understand that there's maybe some hurt feelings in the Packers fan base with Aaron Rodgers. I know that the departure, he did not ingratiate himself the best in late years. But the man gave a ton to this franchise. And in general, just don't be that person that cheers injuries. Don't do that. That's just despicable.
I have my disagreements with Rodgers and all his takes and many of his takes and all that, but I don't wish that.
No.
That's his profession, and so I would have, like I said, I would have enjoyed watching how this whole season played out. So it is a shame that we won't get to see it.
Well,
Maybe we'll get to see Tim Boyle eventually. Or a different Packer.
Hey, that's how Kurt Warner's career started, right?
Yeah.
and the whole Tom Brady to the Jets thing, it's just not going to happen. One, he's not going to unretire. Two, he owns a stake in the Las Vegas Raiders.
Huh.
Yeah, you have to sell that.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
Anyways, one thing we will get to see is the Packers versus the Falcons on Sunday. We will be in Atlanta this weekend. Spoon, are you going to be able to go see Messi? Are you going to get there in time?
No,
Oh,
it's not going to happen. I'm going to have to try a different city.
Yeah, it would have been fun, though, to get to
Yeah.
see him play in Atlanta on Saturday. We will all be there. Spoon will have his live blog going during the game. We will have full
It
wrap-up
won't break
coverage.
down this time.
Well,
I assure you.
knock on wood.
Spoon beats technology.
I've been assured.
Yeah, the famous last words. We will all be there, and we'll have full wrap-up coverage for you, as well as the 1-0 Packers take on the 1-0 Falcons, both looking for their second win with young teams. Should be a sneaky, exciting game. Guys,
Yep.
Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. This has been the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com.